Okay, so we're trucking right along, putting our beautiful Dixie Belle Golf on this piece of furniture. And we're on our ugly coat, remember. One thing I just want to point out is when I'm doing the drawer openings, if you know that your inside is not going to be seen by the shape of your drawer front is covering up this, I would not paint too far into here, because when the furniture maker made this furniture, they only left a little bit of room for your drawer to slide in and out. And I know it's only a coat of paint, but if you get too much paint built up in here, you're going to have an issue with opening and closing the drawer. So I just go as close to the edge, what needs to be done, and I don't go inside because I don't want to have to go back. I go, oh my gosh, I can't shut the drawer, and now I got to go in there and sand off all the paint that I just put on. So, you know, take a look at where the drawer fronts hit before you, so you're prepared for going on the inside. If you have, some things you have to because it has a very small drawer front. So this piece, I'm just going right at the edge. I mean, nobody's going to see in there except the moving guy when you go to move and you're taking out the drawers and he goes, oh my God, this is the most beautiful piece of furniture. And you can say, oh, I painted it. Okay, so we're moving right along. We're going to try to turn this giant piece a little bit so you can view the ugly backside. I'm going to keep giving my paint a little spritz. And after we get our first coat on, I'm going to show you the jar of paint. So you can see how much paint I actually used for one coat. And you're going to be amazed at how little paint I have used. I mean, this isn't a big piece of furniture, but I have not used a whole lot of paint getting this first coat on. Make sure you pay attention to the little details like the legs. And you might think, oh, I can't see the back of that leg. But, you know, depending on where it is in the room, you might. And then you're going to go, oh, no, missed a spot. So again, remember, you want to go with the grain of the wood. So this piece of furniture has this framed out section. So I'm following along the grain of each of these sections. And don't neglect the underside, because you might be laying on the floor doing yoga and then you'll look up and see the underside wasn't painted. So I usually try to get in like my edges first and then spread it on. My paint's getting a little thin right here, but I know that I had a lot up here, so I just stole it from there. Give it a spritz and a tiny dip. Dixie Belle paints, like I said, they're mineral-based paints. They are self-leveling paints. So they're going to, that also is going to help you with less brush strokes because it's self-leveling. And it doesn't stink either. I mean, there's like no smell. Want to smell? Now, depending on what kind of furniture you're doing, or usually I don't paint the back. I mean, this and most pieces of furniture, their backs are just a piece of press board or some, you know, it's hidden. So I'm going to save my beautiful paint for the stuff that you can see. And when you're painting, if you can paint inside, because we live in Florida and we already discussed our awful humidity, your paint's going to dry better. And also, just for your own purposes, if you can get it onto a table or elevate it slightly, you'll be much more comfortable. You won't have as much back pain when we have to lean over and do things. Okay, so we're moving along in this lovely Gulf beauty. I just wanted to show you, so this whole piece now has one coat. So now we're going to continue on doing our second coat on the front of this beauty. I wet my brush again, just a little dip in, and I'm going with the grain of the wood. And look, that second coat, I mean, right there, you can see the difference. Where the coverage is, that second coat just, it gets beautified. Now, some paints, it all depends on what color you were as far as the furniture and what color you're going to. If you're doing like a white or an off-white, sometimes I'm going to say you definitely need 3 coats. But I think we're going to be able to make it with just 2 coats on this. Now, the other thing with the chalk paint, if you've ever noticed, you know, you painted the wall, your dining room walls, and you had a little oopsie somewhere or you missed a spot. We all know that if you go back and go, oh, just a little more there, you're going to, for whatever reason, you see where you touched it up. But with the chalk paint, you don't see that. So after I'm all done with my second coat and I go, oh no, I missed this section here or a little spot, I can go back and just touch it up. It just kind of levels itself right back in and you don't see those touch-up spots. So I just keep going with a little water and a little paint. So right here, I am, you know, obviously crossing over from the piece that goes horizontal to the piece that goes vertical. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm brushing it so the piece, that little brush stroke that went over, I'm bringing it back down again. So I keep going with the grain of the wood. Now, like this piece, we're kind of hurrying it to dry to get another coat in. So if you see, I don't know if you can like zoom in tight on that spot, but like as I'm brushing it, it almost looks like I'm brushing off the paint. It's because it wasn't totally dry underneath. And what I would do is just leave it. And then I'll go back and that'll be one of my touch-up spots. But if I keep playing and playing, you're just going to make it worse. So I would just leave that little ugly spot and keep moving along. And remember, it's just paint. That's what I tell my customers all the time. It's just paint. If it's horrible and awful, you paint it over. If you get it on there and you're like, what was I thinking with this color? It's just paint. Paint it over. I only recommend saying that to yourself like 2 times at the most because you don't want to paint it so many times. Then if you get to that point, you're going to want to sand it down. But you know, if I decided all of a sudden I don't like this color, I could go over it with a different color. But just that difference from 1 coats to 2, it's fabulous. All right, we're going to turn it a little closer to me because my arms aren't that long. But one of my favorite parts with painting, you know, this old pre-loved furniture is maybe because I'm getting older in my own years slowly, but you know, nothing should be gone. Everything old is new again. You know, there's always something to refresh and bring things back to life. So you're watching this video because you probably want to try it. And like I said, it's just paint. Try it. If you have an issue, here at Eclectic Whimsy, we are always more than happy to answer your questions, whether they're in person or over the phone or via text, whatever. Whenever people come in here and buy paint from me, I always give them my number and I'm like, listen, if you get scared or nervous or whatever, just call me. I'll talk you off the cliff. And sometimes people just decide, I can't do it. And that's when us girls here at Eclectic Whimsy will do it for you. But I always think it's nice for everybody to just give it a try, because sometimes you're totally surprised at what you can do. And if you look here, it's almost like you would think that's a totally different color. But, you know, just the second coat coverage. And you can also see here, that's why I called that first one the ugly coat, because it's ugly. But the second coat, that's where the beauty is. So Dixie Belle, we've got about 60 different paint colors. And if you go onto the Dixie Belle website, there is like a million more paint colors, because they have all kinds of recipes, you know, half golf and half cotton mixed together make coastal aqua. I just said that. I don't know if that's real. But they, you know, there's all kinds of recipes. You mix half and half of these two, you get another color. And that's kind of fun, like, ooh, look what I could make. So all the Dixie Belle paints blend very well together. Say goodbye to that last bit of ugly coat. Now, clearly, you know, it still doesn't look perfect because, one, it's drying, and two, I am kind of rushing a little, but the dry time. Dixie Belle chalk paint dries very quickly. Usually, and the best way I can describe the dry time is if I'm doing a larger piece, like something, say, twice the size of this, usually by the time I do my first coat on the whole piece, it's dry enough to start the second coat. So it does move along and dry pretty quickly. Now, another spot that you have to pay attention to when you're doing a piece of furniture is when you have like a top surface like this. So I just went down the side, but I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but like there's a glob line of paint along that edge there. And because the chalk paint dries quickly, I need to get rid of that as fast as I can. If you don't, you're gonna need to sand it down some. But I just smoothed it all out. Now I'm just gonna double check this side and make sure that's nice and smooth. But I'm just gonna kind of puff it out with my paintbrush to make sure it's smooth. And this lovely piece is almost done with 2 full coats. Now, there's lots of different top coat options, or I should say decorative top coat options that you can do to your furniture. You can use, we have glazes if you want to add some like distressed look to it. There's glazes and waxes that will, you know, you can rub into the grooves. Some of that is something that I would say is definitely level 2. We're doing our basic chalk painting, learning how to put on the paint today. But and you know, if you call me or come in the shop and, you know, Yvonne, I need to know about how to apply the glaze or whatever, I am more than happy to explain it to you. Sometimes I'll give things a nice distressing with just using another paint. You know, just running, it's called dry brushing, and I'll just dry brush a little bit of white or brown to give it that distressing look also. You can also distress furniture by sanding off certain spots. This would be a good piece to do that because my underneath is that nice warm brown. So I could just get my sandpaper and rub along the edges, and then I'd have that distressed look. And there's so many cool and fun things you can do to, you know, make your furniture special. Honestly, this piece, it is going to turn into, on top of my base coat, I am planning on painting an octopus on it. If you can't hand paint on things, you know, stenciling is a great option too. Using a stencil and just adding some brushed embellishments to make it look like you did it yourself. Well, you did do it yourself to make it look more hand painted. That's a better way to word that. So I'm going to finish up this coat, and then we're going to let our piece dry for a little while before we put our sealer on. Okay, so we have 2 coats on our darling little dresser now. What a difference from the start of this video. The next step is, once your piece is totally dry, well, let me backtrack a little bit, sorry. You want to go back and make sure if you need to have any touch-ups you need to do. Sometimes you'll get little spots, I call them boogers because they're just little bumps on there. We have these finishing sponges. It looks like the filter to an air conditioner filter, but you can just rub it on there. It's very, very soft. If you have any of those little bumps, go over the whole piece. You don't have to. I find a lot of times it just makes my paint a little softer. So I'm hardly rubbing. It's just kind of, because it's chalk, you know, it gets rid of a little bit of the chalk residue. So I just rub it over nice and soft with my finishing sponge. And it's beautiful. If you could feel it, I would let you touch it. Okay, then the next step is so I'm all touched up. Any of these little spots, like I showed you here, I've gone back and I'm going to touch those up. My whole piece isn't dry enough for all of that yet. You usually want to give it, I would say, at least 2 hours of dry time. But we don't have 2 hours today. So, but this drawer front was one of the first ones I did, and he's ready. He's ready to go. So I need to seal it. Dixie Belle has a couple different sealing options. We have wax. You can rub wax on. The wax comes in clear, white, black. Obviously, if you put a white wax on, you're going to change your color. It's going to tone it down a little bit. The black wax is going to make it darker, look more aged. But I will sometimes use the wax just for like little ornamental detail, but I like to always put a clear coat on top of my furniture. So we have 2 different types of clear coat. We have one called clear coat, and then we have gator hide. I always recommend the gator hide. This is my open bottle. You can tell it's been very loved and used. Gator hide is water repellent. It's not waterproof. But if you have a wet cup and you put it on top, it's not going to instantly ruin your paint. You'll be able to wipe it off, dry it off a little bit. Now, if you leave a wet cup on there for 2 days, yeah, it's probably going to make a mark. But the gator hide, it just gives it a nice, strong surface. Usually, like especially a tabletop, when you put the gator hide on, you want to allow it to cure probably 48 to 72 hours at least before you put stuff on top of it. Just so it gets that nice hard surface. I even had a customer who painted, she used a slick stick first and painted her bathroom tile in her shower. And she did about 6 coats of gator hide, and that was over a year ago, and that shower is still holding up. So I think the gator hide is fabulous. And anything that we paint in the store to sell, we always use gator hide on. So you're going to just pour a little bit of gator hide into a tray. I have this fancy plastic TV dinner tray. I apply it with a sponge because then I'm not going to get any brush strokes from it. You want your sponge to be damp. So I wet it and I wrung it out really well. So it's a damp sponge. I'm just going to dip it in to my gator hide here. And I'm just going to do nice, even strokes all the way across. Now, because it's clear, sometimes you might miss a spot and you won't see it until it starts drying. The gator hide has a little bit of a gloss, not a high gloss at all, but it does have a little sheen to it. So I'm going to streak it all across nice and evenly the best I can. If you miss a spot, it's okay because you always want to do 2 coats of gator hide. because that happens. It's clear and you just miss spots. So you want to do a second coat. So now that's going to dry. And probably in like an hour, when it's nice and dry, I'm going to go back and give it another nice even coat, just like that. And then my piece is done. After you use your sponge with the gator hide, make sure you wash it out right away with soap and water, because it's going to get crunchy and you won't ever be able to use it again. Once you're all sealed with the gator hide, then you can put your hardware back on and your piece is finished. And remember, if you don't like the hardware that was on it, you can always buy new hardware. There's, you know, different retail locations you can buy hardware. If you like it but the color doesn't match anymore, you can use like an enamel spray paint and just, you can paint it with Dixie Belle, but I feel like the metal a lot of times I just have a better outcome just spraying them, and it's a lot faster too. And you slap your hardware back on and you have a brand new piece of furniture. Something old became beautiful again. So come and visit us at Eclectic Whimsy, if you can, 2801 Placida Road. And we have all your Dixie Belle needs here. If we don't have it, we place orders weekly, and we can order for you what you need. And we are always more than happy to help you along the way with your project. So once you come and get your stuff, you go home and you know, have a breakdown. Oh my gosh. Call me. I will talk you off the cliff. I will get you back where you need to be. It's just paint. So you can always sand it off, repaint it, whatever. It's just paint. So come and see us at Eclectic Whimsy. Watch our video. Enjoy it. And don't forget that creativity is contagious, and we love to pass it on to you. Thanks. Bye.